Hello, go away. Go away. How do I get there? We go. Okay. Just can never get this thing. Okay. We just went through all of Seder Shtalshalos, right? How the not only do our mitzvahs affect the kelim of Seder Shtalshalos, they also affect the eres of Seder Shtalshalos. I've explained why that is. The eres mistalik min a kli. What does that mean? That level of godliness that was destined to be revealed by that kli is not revealed. The atom existence of the kli obviously is maintained, right? It doesn't go out of existence. But the godliness that was ultimately to be revealed by that kli is not revealed. Okay, and now the Rebbe then said, and even beyond that level, the level of arich is also affected because it's the source of the light that descends down into that whole system called Seder Shtalshalos, right? So I'm starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up. V'zehu, we read this line, but we'll just read this because we're going to, the last thing the Rebbe is going to explain in this chapter is atik. How atik is not affected. V'zehu she'inyan aveda negeh bebechinas arich. Right? That's why aveda affects arich, because arich is the shurish, the source of the light that emanates down. Ki bechinas arich hu shurish l'ne'et solim. It's the source of the light that's drawn down into Atzilus. And since that in the realm of the Ne'et Solim, mean Atzilus and down, our Avodah effects, and we said, even though the Rebbe, interesting enough, has not said these words in this mimer, but it is explained in many places in Chassidus that our Avodah is Meisif Arba Elam Atzilus. So now we understand that, right? What that all means, right? And that's really quite an amazing thing. In this mimer, so we're learning what we don't do, so to speak. We don't affect Atik. Okay, Seder. So maybe someone walks away depressed and has to go to a safe room because he's been told that he doesn't affect Atik, right? But what he's being told is really quite astounding. That when you and I do a mitzvah down here, we're Meisif in Elam Atzilus. We affect the 10 spheres in Elam Atzilus. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty astounding, right? That's certainly not what's called in this country a mabakach, something that has no value. It's quite astounding. Right? V'rak, and only bebechinas atik, and only relative to atik, did Chazal say that wild statement, Amr Chazal v'chi ich beslei. Does a Kadosh Baruch Hu care whether we shut from the front of the neck or the back of the neck? That was relative to Atik. Does Atik care? Now, I was going to explain what that means. But there's a simple shot at this point in the Maimon. What does Atik care? Meaning that's a level of reality that is below is so far below the reality of Atik that Atik is completely transcendent of that and, so to speak, uninterested in that completely. Completely transcendent state of reality. It has nothing to do with the world. Is it ultimately part of the process of the downward emanation of light that ends up becoming light that powers the world? Yes, it's part of that whole system. But is every part of that whole system directly and actively connected to what's going on down here at the bottom of the chain? No. No, completely transcendent. And that's what I was going to say now. Why? Because Atik, what's Atik? Bechinas Atik, who Adon Yochid Shoresh Shoreshim. Right, that's what we said from the Avedas HaKodesh. Shoresh Shoreshim Dafka, Daika, the source of sources. Not the source of Atzilus, but the source of Atzilus. Right? Shoresh Veloy Shoresh L'Ne'et Solim, and not the source of Atzilus. Because it's beyond being the source of Atzilus. So you might ask, and I was going to explain that right now. So wait a minute. But based on the domino effect, why can't I say that if my mitzvahs affect Arich, so then the reverse domino effect, my mitzvahs should also affect Atik, because Atik is the source of the light that's nimshach, that's drawn down into Arich. So if I'm affecting Arich, aren't I by definition affecting Atik, which is the source of the source? Rebbe will explain why. Ube'emes nivdal hu gam mihasharashi. In truth, it's actually separate, meaning transcendent of, also the notion of being a source of anything. Right? We call it source. Why are we calling that? The Rebbe will explain. Share atik umi lashon v'ye'atek. The Ye'atek is Avram uprooting his tent. Atik is a state of uprootedness. Atik is a state of complete transcendence. Hainushu muvdal. It's separate. Gam bechinas arich. It's even separate from arich. It's even transcendent of arich. But wait a minute. We called it the source of arich, the source of the sources. And that, and that which we call it the source of sources. Einu ela b'shem hamushal bilvad. Only a borrowed name. Where have you seen that language before? A borrowed name. In Tanya, right? Talking about a Beinoni is half and half. Right? Tzaddik is all schus, and the Russia is chayiv, and the Beinoni is half and half. So the Alter Rebbe is telling us a Beinoni never does an Aveira. So how can a Beinoni be half and half? So the Alter Rebbe says it's a shem mushal inyan shel schar v'einish. It's, so to speak, a borrowed term for the notion of reward and punishment. Meaning relative to reward and punishment, so the Beinoni is half and half. But relative to the etzem toyar, the essential description of someone as a Beinoni, so that's what I'm writing in this book. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. Shem mushal. It's a term borrowed for another purpose. So relative to, since I'm talking about arich in the context of being a source of something, so I want to define atik also in that context. So I'll say it's not the source of Seder Ishtalshelut, it's the source of the source, meaning it's transcendent of. But in essence, I will not describe atik. If I'm describing atik itself, I will not describe it in terms of its relationship to arich. I'll describe it in terms of its relationship to what's above it, so to speak. Now, in general, and this is really something very interesting, the difference we talked earlier about atik being panemius of keser, and arich being, here the Rebbe says madrega tachtoina, but in other places it says the chitzonius of keser. So we said, what's the difference between chitzonius and panemius and chitzonius? Being and function. Okay, so now if you think about being and function, being, what's the focus on being? Where it comes from. What's its source? Where does it come from? What is it really? Function, where does it go to? What's it the source of? Right? When something functions, we're talking about what's happening outside of it. Being, well, what is this thing? Well, where does it come from? Right? What's its source? Okay, so in that sense, relative to arich, which is about function, so I'll say, what's the function of atik? It's the source of the source. But I don't define atik in terms of function. I define atik in terms of being, right? So I'm not going to talk about atik as a source of anything, because that's only what it does, but that's not what it is. Okay, so arich, since arich is all about function, it's that level of keser that's all about being the source of the next level of reality called the tzilus. So then I'll call arich shorish l'netzol, the source of the netzol. Now, relative to arich, I'll call atik the source of it. But relative to itself, I won't call it that. Relative to itself, I call it a state of complete transcendent reality. It's not the source of anything. It's a state of being. I'm not interested in what it does. I want to know what it is. Now, it does something, but that's secondary. So that's what Rebbe is saying. And this level is not affected by our Aveda. This it says, if you did an Aveira, what? Have you affected? What have you done to him? And the multitude of your iniquities. What have you done to him? Even sadakta, if you did righteousness, matitin. There are those in Lubavitch who are always wondrous about the fact, people for bringing about it in somewhat a jocular fashion, since this is in the Bar Mitzvah Mimer. So what's the first thing a kid says at his bar mitzvah? You do aveiros, it doesn't matter. You do mitzvahs, it doesn't matter. That's not exactly true, but that, like, if you read that line of ear, that's what he's saying. Now, the context is that in the bar mitzvah line, of course, is that it does. Okay, so fine. Everything's good. We've got a nice, neat little mimer, and the mimer could end now, and the Rebbe could say, and all of this is very wonderful, and we should study this and bring Mashiach, and everything will be good. Right there. There's our little mimer. There's a nice mimer, 3-page mimer, right? Explaining avodah and what it is, but amnam. That word means we're going to go places. Amnam. However, this is not enough. There's more that we have to understand. Amnam. Adayin tzarich lahavin. We have to understand. If you, I tell you what, let's go back to the first page for a second. We're going to look at the pasuk, and I hope you're going to know. I'm going to translate the pasuk very slowly, and you're going to notice something. If you don't notice it, everyone in Bangladesh is going to know that. Okay, so just no pressure. Now, I'm going to read them in order, right? That means I'm not reading them in the order they appear in the mimer, because the second pasuk is really the first pasuk, right? Last week's parsha, right? Okay, so I'm starting on the second line, and then I'll go back to the first line. Because this is the order in the Torah. V'vadat mesavai lokech. You should serve your God. Ubeirach, and He will bless your lechem and your mayim, and I will remove sickness from your midst. What's wrong with that pasuk? I'll read it again. You should serve God, ubeirach, and He, who's He referring to? God. Beirach eslach machaves meimecho, and I will remove sickness from your midst. What's the problem?
The he and the I.
Who's I? Why does it go from third person to first person? Okay, now look at the next person, which is, again, the first one in our mimer, but the next one in the Torah. There should not be, or you should not be, mean don't be, or you won't be, right? Is it a promise, or is it a command? The number of your days I will fill. So who's He and who's I? Now He, you're right, seems to be referring to God. So who's I? Obviously not Moshe, right? This is a pasuk in Shmos. In Devarim, so I could be Moshe, right? But not in Shmos. So what's this about? Okay, so there's now this obvious grammatical problem in the pasuk. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so let's see what the Rebbe says. Amnam, however, Adayin tzarich lahavin. We have to understand this. Page 326. Dahare. Mashu kosuv v'vadin esvaylokechem. That which it says, and you should serve the Eibishter. Kai. That stands, relates to. Lo yirak al medregas seder ishtalshelus. Not only the levels of seder ishtalshelus. Shesham negein in Aveda Kanal, that those are the levels that are affected by our Aveda Kanal, as we said earlier. Elagam, also al bechino, on a level shelamaylam ishtalshelus, that's beyond ishtalshelus, meaning even beyond arach. Why? So I was going to explain. Behektim, first, hadiuk b'lashon hakosav, a careful reading of the language of the verse. Sheyesh beistira, there's a contradiction, mireisha l'sefer, from the beginning of the verse to the end of the verse, the contradiction we just noticed. The betchila omer, at the beginning of the verse, what does it say? Should serve God and He will bless you. B'lashon nistar. Right? What's lashon nistar? Hidden, meaning what you and I call in English third person. Third person is hidden, right? He said, who's He? Right? I don't know who He is. You, I know who you are. I know who I am. If I say you, so then everybody in the conversation knows who I'm talking about. If I say I, everybody in the conversation knows who I'm talking about. If I say he, well, then it's unclear who I'm talking about. Right? And we always say this all the time. Every time I see a pronoun, I have to ask to whom is the pronoun referring. Right? Okay, but say that, well, that's only the pronoun he and she, right? That's not the pronoun I and you. I know who I and you are referring to, at least in context relative to whoever's talking. If John said to Jim, I'm going to the store, so John is going to the store. I know that. John said to Jim, he went to the store. Who's he? I don't know. So that's called Lashon Nistar in Lashon HaKodesh. Okay? Third person. So then the Rebbe continues, Kashlishi Matabe, like a third person speaking. Like a narrator, narrating about someone else doing something. He went to the store. Oh, so I'm telling you that he went to the store, and he is a third person that isn't me and isn't you, and it's someone else, and I'm telling you about that. So I'm the Shlishi Medaber, I'm the narrator. V'achar kacham, and then afterwards it says, Vasiresi, I will remove, B'loshen neichach. Neichach literally means present. When you take attendance, it's called nochachut. Who's there, who's present, right? But it means first person. In English, we'll call that first person. It says it in first person. He will bless, third person, and I will remove, first person. So who's he and who's I? Kimedaber baratzmai. Someone speaking in terms of himself. I. Now the Rebbe explains something astounding that you probably never thought about. Right? Unless you learned the Ramban's Hakdama to Sefer Bereshis, which you should. It's required reading for everybody. Where can you find it? As far as I know, in that room, there's an English copy of the Ramban's Parish on the Torah, translated by Dr. Chevelle, who is the American rabbi who moved there to Israel and did unbelievable work on the Ramban, both in Hebrew, and he published a Hebrew Ramban, but with footnotes in the bottom in a very organized text, and he also translated the Ramban into English, and it's a great book. If you look at the Ramban's Hakdama to Sefer Bereshis, the Ramban wrote a Hakdama to each of the 5 books of the Torah, but his Hakdama to Sefer Bereshis is his Hakdama to the Torah in whole. And there's this interesting question. There's a number of interesting questions. First of all, how was the Torah written? How did Moshe write it? Piece by piece, all at once. Right? He was given pieces by the Eibishter to write down. Or was he given it all and he wrote it down as things were happening? Or did he write it all down? Did he write everything until Devarim? And then, how did that all work? Like at the end, I understand we end up with a Sefer Torah, but obviously some of the Sefer Torah had to be written at the end because the last book is all about the 40th year. It's about the last few weeks, last 5 weeks of the 40th year, right? So I assume that it had to be written later. Right, so how did it work in terms of writing the Torah? But there's another interesting question that no one ever thinks about, and the Ramban talks about it. It's so fascinating. Va'inyan hu, al pi ma shekasav Ramban b'Akdamasa lePerush al Torah. Based on the Ramban was a Rishon, lived a little bit after Rashi, Spain, North Africa, buried here in Yerushalayim. The Ramban is buried here. Moved there to on the end of his life, left his family. His family couldn't come, and he came. One of the major Rishonim, the 2 most important Perushim on the Torah are Rashi and the Ramban. And people who learn Torah seriously with Rishonim, so Rashi and Ramban. You learn Rashi, everybody learns Rashi. And then the Ramban, that's the second thing you'd learn. Absolutely amazing parish in the Torah, and the Ramban did something very unique in his parish in the Torah. He included Kabbalah in his parish in the Torah. Right, so the Ramban will say Pshat, and then he'll say Al Derech HaEmes, and the Kabbalah of it is like this. Al Pi Ma Shekasav Ramban B'Akdamasa lePerush al Torah. Shaloi Kasav Moshe Rabbeinu HaTorah. That Moshe did not. It's not saying Moshe did not write the Torah. Don't worry, he's not a non-believer. You have to keep reading. That Moshe did not write the Torah, Daled Sfarim Rishonim, the first 4 books of the Torah, Kimedaber Bad Atzmai, someone who's speaking about himself. In Devarim, Moshe says, God spoke to me, I said to you. But the rest of the Torah doesn't ever say God spoke to me, it says God spoke to Moshe. Right? So who's saying that, so to speak?
Yeah.
Right? V'yadaber Shem el Moshe lemor, the most common pasuk in the Torah. So the Rebbe is going to deal with that. I mean, the Ramban deals with it. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah as if there is a narrator narrating the Torah. Right? And what's that narrator telling me? That Yud Kei Vav Kei spoke to Moshe. Doesn't say I spoke to Moshe. It doesn't say God spoke to me. Someone else, so to speak, is writing V'yadaber Havaya El Moshe Lemor. Now, who is that? Right? Ella, rather, how did Moshe write the Torah? Kishlishi Medaber, like a narrator, a third person speaking. Someone is telling us about a conversation that Yud Kei Vav Kei has with Moshe. Or with Avram or Elohim, with whatever, whoever's talking and to whomever they are talking. Hainu, ki'ilu einu medaber shem havaya v'lo Moshe. The one speaking is not Havaya, not Moshe. Ela kishlishi medaber, rather a narrator. Ukimay, like the pasuk we just talked about. V'yadaber v'al Moshe lemar. Appears 69 times in the Torah, evidently. I've never counted, but I heard a class once years ago where someone said that, and I believe it. V'yadaber v'al Moshe lemar. She'ein zed dibur shel Moshe. This is not Moshe speaking. Why? Because if it were Moshe speaking, she'az hayitzarich lemer would have had to say v'yadaber Shem elai. God spoke to me, which is what it says in Devarim. V'chein, similarly, ein zed dibur shel Havaya. This is not Havaya talking, narrating. Why not? Sha'az, if it were hayitzarich lemer, it would have to say v'adaber el Moshe. I spoke to Moshe. Huh. So who's talking? Who's telling the story? Ella. You ever wonder about that? No one ever thinks about this until they learn. They go, whoa, that's like so obvious. I never thought about that. Who wrote this book? Moshe didn't, of course Moshe wrote it down, but Moshe didn't write it. And Yud Kei Vav Kei didn't write it, so to speak. So who wrote it? Right? Hellahu kishlishi. It's a third person. Lo Havaya v'lo Moshe. That's not Havaya, not Moshe. Hamedaber, who's speaking, umesaper, and telling, oides, about dibur shel Havaya Moshe, about the revelation of Yud Kei Vav Kei to Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Now, so who is that? So the Ramban explains, it's explained, the Shlishi Medaber u'Lamaylu Yishneim, it's above both of them. Lamaylu Mibichinus Moshe, obviously higher than Moshe, but also Lamaylu Gam Mibichinus Shem Havaya, also higher than Shem Havaya. So now, you've learned enough Chassidus. Who's going to be the ultimate author of the Torah? Atzmus. Wow. Right? Oh, okay, so now, hold on, we're going to say that in a minute. Atzmus is describing which aspect of godly revelation is relating to this person at this particular time. This aspect of me called Elohim, this aspect of me called Havaya. Okay, but it's all Atzmus talking. And where do we see that very clearly? V'yadaber Elohim es kol devar me'elo leimor. God said all these things. Anochi, I, Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Elokecha. 3 different levels of reality. Atzmus or Kli. Right? Anochi, Atzmus, Havaya, or Elokecha. Kalim. The Atzmus is drawn down into Shem Havaya, which is the source of the Or, and that's drawn down into immanent reality called Elokim, Elokecha. Oh, okay, so that's pretty wild. So now if you think about our pasuk, what does it say? Serve God, He will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness. Who's I? So who's being affected by our avodah, so to speak? Atzmus. So how can you say that there's a level not affected? How can you say we affect Adar and we don't affect Atik? When we just, if you look at this pasuk simply, we're saying very clearly in this pasuk that Atzmus is being affected. Now, whatever that means, that Atzmus is being affected, not changed, but somehow responding to our avodah. Why? Because he wants to, not because he has to, right? And we know that. We've talked about that at great length. Okay. Anything that's happening outside of Atzmus is happening only because Atzmus wants it to and not because it has to be. Okay, fine. That being said, Atzmus wants to be connected to us such that what we do will cause a response in Atzmus. Why does he want that? I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's astounding, but it doesn't matter. Wow. So now we have to understand everything all over again, right? We thought we had it all in a nice neat little package. But now the Rebbe just blew that package apart. See, look at simple pshat in this pasuk. Simple pshat in this pasuk is that Atzmus is saying that I will remove, I will fill, meaning Atzmus is being affected, so to speak, by our mitzvahs. Okay, so first, before the Rebbe says that we're getting to Atzmus, the Rebbe says, explain Shem Havaya. Simply. Ulamaila gami b'china Shem Havaya. Ki Shem Havaya. Rebbe just wants us to understand that there is something beyond Shem Havaya. Now we do understand that. Okay, but why do we understand it? Because of things like this one. Rebbe explains it to us. Ki Shem Havaya. Even though it is it's a state of transcendent reality beyond time, right? Because the word Yud Kei Vav Kei has two meanings in Pshat. But in both meanings, the Yud is a conjugating the verb, but the Yud is a state of constancy. Yud can be future tense, right? Hu yidaber, he will speak tomorrow. Okay, but Yud can also be, he speaks and continues to speak. The source of that is brought twice in Tanya, once in Tanya, once in Shari Chibamuna. It's a Rashi on Eiv. It says, Kacha Yasa Eiv. This is what Eiv will do? No. This is what Eiv does all the time. He's constantly doing this. Okay? So Yud, it can be future tense, it can also be constancy. So Yud Kei Vav Kei has two meanings. Because the word Kei Vav Kei can either be mihaveh, he brings into being, he causes to be, right? Lihiyot is to be, lihavot is to cause to be. So Yud and then Kei Vav Kei would be he's constantly bringing into being. That's definitely one of the pshatim in the word, right? He's constantly bringing the world into existence. He renews the world at every macrosecond. Okay, that's true. But here the Rebbe says the other pshat, the word hoveh. What does the word hoveh also mean? Well, you don't know that. The word hoveh, what does it mean?
Is.
Okay, but look what we said. Immerse haya hoveh v'yiyeh. So then it's he was, he is, and he will be. Okay, so generally the word hoveh means present. Here you're right, it means is, right? Even though we never use it in a sentence, we don't say he is speaking. We just say he speaks. Hu medaber. We don't say hu hoveh medaber. We don't say that. In English we do, right? But we never conjugate. There's never active conjugation in present tense of to be, only in past and future. Okay, that being said, the word hoveh means is, you're right, it also is present, right? Avar, past, hoveh, present, atid, future. So hoveh is the present. So yud and then kei vav kei is a constant state of present, meaning beyond past, present, future. There's no past, present, future. Just a constant state of present, beyond time. That's also Yud Kei Vav Kei. So that's what the Rebbe is saying here. That Ha Yehoive V'yeh Ke'echad. And that's Yud Kei Vav Kei. Harehu, even though it's a transcendent level, Harehu Shayach Lisavos. But it's still relevant to the bringing into being of worlds. Lishtalshlus, the four worlds. It's the or that's nimshach down into the world, so it's still shaykh to the world. Right? Yud Kei Vav Kei is not completely transcendent. Meaning, on one level, it's transcendent. But it's a level of transcendence that's shaykh to the world. So similar to what we said earlier, Sons at Chukas, that Shem Havaya, that Or Sevev is shaykh to the worlds. Because what's the continuation of that sentence, Or Sevev? Or Hasevev Kol Almin. How do we define Sevev? Relative to worlds. It's transcendent of worlds, right? Oh, so in other words, I'm defining it in terms of world. It's transcendent of the world, but it's defined in terms of the world. Oh, you're fair. Now, there's a level of R that's beyond that also, right? Okay, it's just completely beyond worlds. Level of reality completely beyond worlds. Okay, but there's also a level of transcendent reality that is defined. When we say transcendent of what? Of the world. Oh, so I'll define it in terms of world. Not simply because that's the only way I can define it, because that's where I am, but also because that's its definition. Because what is Yud Kei Vav Kei? Yud Kei Vav Kei is the source of the Or that ultimately is nimshach into Olam, into the Olamis. That's Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's what it is. That level of godly reality. So therefore, there must be levels beyond that. And that level which is beyond both of them, Moshe Vavaya, says a lot about Moshe, right? That he's just put in the same sentence as the Eibusher all the time, right? That which is beyond both of them, is the essence of the Eibusher. Shehu medaber u'mesaper. He's the one speaking and telling. Skip the brackets, we'll come back to them in a second. Oidos about hadibur d'shem avayel Moshe. The conversation between the speech of Shem Havaya to Moshe. Wow. Okay, let's see the brackets. Erdel Tzaut. Tzaut means to tell. Was is vorgekommen, that which is happening in Seder Shtashlis. Who's telling us about that? Atzmus. Atzmus saying down there in Seder Shtashlis, I just want you to know what happened. This aspect of me, called Shem Havaya, spoke to Moshe and said, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'marta leim. That's how the Torah was written. And if that's how the Torah was written, so then we don't quite understand how we can say that there's levels of Elokus not affected by our mitzvahs, when in this verse it says that I, Atzmus, respond to what you do. So our neat little answer to answer our question as to when Chazal say we do affect and when Chazal say we don't affect, and when the Psukim say we do affect and the Psukim say we don't affect, so that neat little answer doesn't seem to be as complete as we would like it to be. Okay, that's why we have another 6 pages in the Mimer.
Is that why we can say that there's an effect? We have an effect on Atzmus because he puts Moshe and Havaya in the same sentence, and it's like Moshe is us, and he's there and he's affecting.
No, but I mean, we're the reason we're learning it here is because once we understand how the Torah was written, and we learned that from that verse, V'yadaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Obviously, Yud Kei Vav Kei is not speaking, and obviously Moshe Rabbeinu is not speaking, right? Again, first 4 books of the Torah, the Devarim works differently. So once we understand how that all works, so then we come to the realization that if it says I in the Torah, it's referring to Atzmus. Okay, well in our pasuk it says I will remove, I will fill. So who is that? It's as basic as that. Right? There's a level beyond, and there's obviously a level beyond Moshe. I mean that's rather clear, but there's a level beyond Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. The God that's speaking in the Torah, there's a level of reality beyond that speaker. And that's the narrator of the Torah. Someone is narrating, which is just an amazing idea that no one ever thinks about when they read the Torah. Like, how does this work? Who said, quote, V'yadaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor? I get who said Daber el Bnei Yisrael v'Martaleim. That's Yud Kei Vav Kei. But who said V'yadaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor? Who said that verse? What? John said to Jim, go to the store. I know who said go to the store. John. Who said John said to Jim? The author of the book. Well, who's the author of the book? Not John, not Jim. Because if John's the author of the book, he says, I said to Jim. And if Jim is the author of the book, he says, John said to me. But that's not what it says. So there's someone else who's not Jim and not John who's writing the book. Oh, okay, that's true. So who is that in the Torah? Atzmos. The Rebbe just throws it out. Oh, yes. Atzmos. Who else?
Well, after he says it, it seems obvious.
Yes, that's what's so interesting, is how obvious it is, and yet no one ever thinks about it until they run into that Ramban. I mean, you have to look in the Ramban, the Hakdama, right? Or they run into it in this Mimer or elsewhere. But the idea of there being a narrator of the Torah, who said, V'yadaber Aval Meshalim? Who said that? Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay, now let's see, we have 5 minutes. The Rebbe now explains, why is it called Dafka Shlishi Medaber? Because we're going to see there's 3 different levels of reality. We've talked about this all the time. Usually we'll say Kalim and Atzmus. Right? So the Rebbe is going to say that in 3 different ways. Atzmus is going to be Atzmus all 3 times, so to speak. But there'll be different ways of relating to Or and Kli. Because you can describe Or and Kli in terms of Sovev and Mamale. So Mamale by definition is Shak to Kli. Or you can say Or and Kli. Right? That's another way of saying exactly the same thing. Or there's a third way, which we haven't encountered, and we'll see what the Rebbe says about it. Okay. V'nikra shlishi dafka, al derech mashakosov, famous pasuk. Why is it a famous pasuk? Because there's also a Chassidish Maimarim on this pasuk, right? So Chassidim know this pasuk. So you tell me what this pasuk, when would there be Maimarim on this pasuk? What time of year? Yechayenu miyermayim, he gives us life from 2 days, b'yom shlishi, and on the 3rd day, yekimena, he establishes us. Okay, when would there be Mairim? Rosh Hashanah, 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, 1 day of Yom Kippur, exactly. Okay, this pasuk, there are many Maimarim with that Dibur Maschil from all the Rebbeim and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Right? Okay, so now here the Rebbe is not talking about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur; he's talking about existence b'chlal. Yechayenu miyoymayim. Chayus comes from 2 different levels of reality. And then the shlishi is the source of all of that, is the yikamenu. That's really how it's all established. Oh, so what's going to be 2 days? Well, simply or in kli, or seviv mamale, or the 3rd way of saying it, which I don't think we've run into together. Ki yadua, shi yechayenu miyamayim, ki yadua. Now, if you look in footnote 32, it'll show you all those places where you'll run into this. From the Tzemach Tzedek and Rebbe Shab, etc. Okay. The basic reality of Seder Ishtalshlus that can be divided into 2. Seder Ishtalshlus is all about 2 things, Or and Kli, right? Above Seder Ishtalshlus, there's only 1 thing, so to speak. It's called Or. In Seder Ishtalshlus, there's a new reality that's called Kli. Okay, so what's that? So the Rebbe says that in 3 different ways. Either bechinas mamale kol almim or bechinas seviv kol almim. Can talk about 2 different levels of or, the light that fills kalim or the light that surrounds it all. Okay, mamale and seviv. Those are the 2 different aspects of seder ishtalshlus. Bechinas eres u bechinas kalim. Okay, that's also something we're very familiar with. And now the Rebbe is going to say a 3rd level, which is more sophisticated and important to understand. but is the same thing. Or Bechinas ha'or kameshu la'atzmei, the reality of the light as it is in terms of itself. That's Sevev, infinite reality. V'hagilui, and the revelation of that light, kameshu lazulose, as it is to the other. What is it that allows the light to be revealed to the other? What reveals light to the other? Kli. Okay. So that's the third level of describing the two different aspects of Seder Yishtalshelus. That there's the light as it is itself, infinite reality, and the light as it's revealed to the other. What's that? That's light allowing itself to be limited by the Kli to be revealed to the other. Because it can only be revealed to the other within the context of finite reality, because there's an other. Right? As long as there's an other, so now we've come into finitude. If there's no other, so then we're still in infinite reality. There's no end, there's just or. But as soon as the or reveals itself to something else, so to speak, so what's that? Well, it has to be Kli allowing that to happen. So, three different ways of describing exactly the same thing. And it's important to remember these three. Sevev memale, okay, fine. The light itself and the light as it's clothed in kelim. Uris and kelim, the most basic distinction. And the as it is mitzad itself. And the as it's revealed to the other. Which is saying exactly the same thing, just in a slightly different way, but on a certain level in a more sophisticated way relative to the itself. Okay, so that's why there's two. And what's the third? Ubiyem shlishi. That's Atzmos. Yichayenu miyarmayim. Our chayes comes from two different levels of reality. It's simple pshat in Yichayenu miyarmayim, right? Could be more straightforward than that. What's that? That's the source of it all, which is Atzmos. And that's why it's called Shlishi Medam. Let's just get to the next page and we'll stop. And that's why it says Shebetchila Nemar, in the beginning of the pasuk it says V'vadatem Zevayla Keichem Ubeidach. Serve God and He, Yud Kei Vav Kei, source of your bracha, drawn down in Teilam Hazeh. He will bless your bread and your water. Sheshlishi Medaber Emer, that the narrator of the Torah says, that when you serve God down there in Seder Yishtalshelus, Azayu Beirach Eslachma V'Samecha, that we also say it's a bracha in Seder Yishtalshelus. Hainu Shahavaya Sha'alav Nemar V'Vadim Mizvah Elokechem, that about it said you should serve Havaya Elokechem, so that level of Elokus. Yivarach Eslachma V'Samecha. We'll bless your bread and your wine. Let's try it. Let's see if we can finish the paragraph in 2 minutes. And afterwards, Meisif, it adds, I will remove sickness. Oh, because this is more powerfully miraculous, right? Preventative medicine is natural. I will remove sickness from your midst. That's already somehow l'mayla mina teva. So it's first person. I will remove. He himself will remove the sickness from your midst. And that takes, so to speak, a greater power than simply preventing sickness. And from this we understand our Aveda Nageya Leirak L'Shem Havaya. Not only L'Shem Havaya, Elagam L'Shishi Medaber. Also, Atzmos. Bechinas Atzmos, U'Masein Zabur. So now we're back to square one. Sha'aveda Pe'elis, this Aveda causes, Leirak U'Beirach Eslachma V'Samecha. Not only does it cause this bracha in your lechem and your mayim, al yedei shem havaya, meaning bracha and gashmis, through shem havaya, elagam v'asiyah simachla, al yedei atzmos u'mal sein tzibarachu. V'tzak lavin, understand? Didn't we say, v'hari b'bechinas shelamayim yishtalshelus ksiv, on this level that's beyond yishtalshelus, atik? Didn't we say in tzedakta matitin lay? How are you affecting that? You're not? Okay. So tomorrow morning we will see the astounding explanation of the Maimer Chazal, Ki Ich Lei. It's absolutely amazing. Okay. So, at the end of the next paragraph, we're going to finish with the first part of the Maimer. Does a Veda affect the Eibishter or not? Okay, yes. Then we're going to say, what is a Veda? That's the next step. And the step after that in the Maimer is, so how do you do that? Right? That's why this Maimer is such an important. This is the ultimate of Veda Maimer. Like, what's a Veda all about? That's step one. What is a Veda? What does it mean? What does that mean? How do I do that? What? Not how do I do that? How do I accomplish that? What is that? Oh, so we'll see. That's going to be Avin Yira. It'll explain what that means. Okay, why Dafka Lashon of Veda, which seems to be Yira. Okay, and then the next step is okay. Now I know what I know what it affects and what it is. So how do I do it?
Right.
Yeah.
I was wondering about the levels that you're talking about in the Torah, this pasuk. So